Sometimes wars are not decided by strategies, not by orders, and not even by weapons. Sometimes it all comes down to a single person who, in the darkest moment, makes a
Get below
decision
deck
capable of
immediately!
changing the fate of dozens. This
Move!
story is precisely about such a person. In late 1944, American escort squadrons were operating at their limit. Every flight over Germany was Russian roulette, where the skies were anything but heaven. Steel tracers, ragged clouds of smoke, the bangs of disintegrating fuselages. At an airfield in England, young Lieutenant James Harper stood beside his P-47 Thunderbolt. He could have been an ordinary farm boy from Nebraska, living a quiet life, growing corn, playing baseball. But the war changed everything. Now his home was an aluminum cockpit, his friends were a roaring engine and a dashboard, and his day began with the smell of gasoline and the clang of tools. Today's mission seemed routine, escorting a group of bombers heading to the Ruhr. But in war, there are no routine tasks, and Harper felt it in his skin, as if something inside quietly whispered, "Today will be different." As Harper took his seat in the cockpit, everything around him seemed to disappear. The joking soldier, the mechanic with a wrench, the commander with a notepad, all receded. There was only the plane. He and the machine were one. Engineers called the Thunderbolt a flying block of metal, massive, overloaded, heavy. But Harper loved it precisely for that. This plane could withstand hits that would tear other aircraft apart. The landing gear rattled, the air sliced through the cockpit, and then they lifted off the ground. The sky embraced them. "Squadron, maintain formation. Climb to 12,000. The commander's voice sounded calm. But Harper still felt that strange unease, like a shadow obscuring the sun. After 20 minutes, they entered dense clouds. The bombers appeared as colossal ghosts, flying in a milky white void. And then, the first radio signal. "Contact! Many!" The radio crackled as if someone had forcefully squeezed the microphone. "Contact left! Altitude -300! Harper saw them before the others. Dark specks bursting from the clouds towards them. They were fast, too fast. German fighters, Focke-Wulf 190s, the ones that made pilots' hearts clench. They were fast, precise, and in the hands of an experienced ace, deadly. The squadron turned sharply. The Thunderbolts peeled off, taking up combat positions. The air was sliced like with a knife. Then, explosions. The first engagement. One bomber ignited like a torch. A turret flew off. The metal body ripped open like a tin can. Harper dove down, opening fire. His Browning machine guns roared, spewing bright streaks of tracers. He saw one of the FW-190s twitch, roll onto its wing, and plunge downwards. But the joy lasted less than a second, because a second Fokker was already on his tail. "Harper, get out! He's on you!" his wingman yelled. He yanked the stick, and the Thunderbolt, heavily but surely, entered a steep turn. But the enemy gunner was faster and smarter. A second, and Harper's cockpit was ripped apart by a flash. Shrapnel pierced the instrument panel, shattered the right window, and one piece struck his left hand directly, knocking it onto the armrest, as if it were alien and useless. Heat, pain, white noise. The world plunged into darkness. The plane lurched, and Harper's eyes filled with blood. He tried to lift his hand. It wouldn't obey. His fingers didn't even move. Then he understood the main thing. Both his hands were finished. His right was burned by flames. His left, he couldn't feel at all. Both useless, like ropes tied to his body. If he let go of the controls now, the Thunderbolt would simply plummet, taking the entire crew with it. "Damn, no, no," he whispered, as a second burst raked across the wing, and the plane vibrated like a wounded beast. And it was then that a single thought, which could save him, formed in his mind. If my hands are dead, I still have my legs. The plane shook, swaying left and right, as if trying to throw the pilot from its saddle. The cockpit smelled of burning, molten metal and blood. Thick smoke curled into his lungs. Harper tried to lift his hands again.
No.
Empty. Both were like stone. The left hung lifelessly, the right was charred. He realized that in another minute, it would be over. The Thunderbolt would fall. "Harper! Harper, are you alive?" the radio screamed, but the voice was barely audible. The plane was plummeting, the altimeter needle dancing downwards. Then Harper bent his knees, braced them against the lower part of the panel, and pushed himself forward. The Thunderbolt jolted and leveled out slightly. "It works! Damn it, it works!" he growled. He had found a way, the simplest, craziest, but a way. He would steer with his feet. To turn, he pressed his foot against the side stop of the panel, shifting his weight. This wasn't piloting an airplane, but taming a beast that resisted, throwing and shaking the Thunderbolt. Harper gradually found his balance, like a tamer on the back of a furious animal. But the worst enemy was the pain. Every movement felt like a red-hot knife in his hands. Every push with his feet tore at his muscles, and his consciousness drifted. He knew one thing: if he lost consciousness, the machine would crash. Clenching his jaw, he whispered, "More, hold on." Pain engulfed him, but each time he drowned, he took a breath and pushed forward with his feet, clinging to life with his last strength. The Thunderbolt trembled, but obeyed. Harper understood. He was still alive, and so was the plane. But returning home? That was a completely different, much more complex story. The sky around them wasn't blue. It was torn, as if someone had clawed through the clouds, leaving black holes of smoke. The Thunderbolt plummeted again, and Harper felt the seat pressing into his spine. He couldn't think about his hands anymore. They were dead. The left hung like a rag doll. The right had turned into a raw wound. But his legs were still there, strong, alive. He pressed his heels against the lower part of the panel so hard that the skin stretched like ropes. The Thunderbolt obediently lifted its nose. It was crude, awkward, chaotic, but it was control. And now Harper understood. If he could fly straight, he would have some chance. In the right cockpit window, a shadow flashed, another FW-190, coming in for a renewed attack. Harper couldn't turn the machine. He was half a pilot in a fatally damaged plane. "Damn it," he muttered quietly as the fighter flashed past. The German probably thought the Thunderbolt was already falling and didn't bother to waste ammunition. This mistake saved Harper's life. That enemy glance, he's already dead. Let him fall. But Harper didn't fall. He held on, clenching the rudder pedals with his feet, leveled the horizon, and regained control. And then the main instrument, the gyroscope, began to spin chaotically, as if the world had turned upside down. The horizon no longer existed in the cockpit. He didn't know where was up, where was down, where was life, and where was death. And yet he continued to guide the plane where he felt, not knew, but felt it needed to go. The control stick rattled between Harper's knees, hitting his useless hands with every jolt of the machine. Every vibration struck his burned muscles so that the world trembled with pain. But he didn't give up. His legs worked for 4, his thighs as levers, his knees as maneuvering pedals, his pelvis as the control axis. This wasn't flying, but a fight for breath, for seconds, for returning home. The radio came alive. "Harper, Harper, where are you? Respond!" He couldn't answer, his voice breaking with pain. He just pushed the panel with his feet, trying to keep the machine steady. Tears flowed by themselves, from pain, not fear. But one thought echoed in his mind. If I give up, we'll crash. If I lose consciousness, it's over. If I don't make it, no one will come home. He knew that somewhere behind him were his comrades, for whom he was the one who had to lead them out, and he had no right to die. The Thunderbolt rocked on its wings like a wounded eagle. Harper held it, with living legs, a broken body, stubborn will. The plane was heading home, though the word home sounded more like a prayer. In the tail section, Gunner Miller felt that the plane was behaving strangely. The radio crackled to life. "Lieutenant Harper, respond. Are you alive in there?" After a pause, Miller realized something was very wrong. "Lieutenant, say something." He slammed the microphone. The answer was hoarse. My hands, both are incapacitated." Dead silence. A pilot without hands was a dead man. But Miller didn't give up. "Sir, are you holding us? Is the plane under control?" Harper barely exhaled. "With my feet, holding the cockpit, trying." Shock! The pilot was controlling the fighter with his feet. Miller took a deep breath and replied, "Sir, we're not falling. That means you're doing it. Keep going." It was a promise. "We won't let you die. We won't let you give up." Commands began to be relayed throughout the plane to alleviate the pilot's burden. Gunners took sector control, the radio operator marked the course, the second gunner monitored fuel, the technician checked pressure. They transformed the Thunderbolt into a collective machine, a single organism, where Harper was the heart, wounded but still beating. Miller heard Harper's breathing over the radio, the weary breaths of a man guiding the machine home. He said, "Lieutenant, hold on. We're with you. We won't abandon you." Harper replied, I'll make it. I promise." Everyone on board understood. If he died, they died together. They were a chain, and there was no weak link. The Thunderbolt, a wounded steel beast, was flying home. But it was flying. Less than 20 minutes remained to the base, but for Harper, these were 20 minutes of eternity. He had long ceased to feel his toes. They were cramped with tension. Every movement felt like pushing through molten metal. His eyes burned from smoke. His hands were dead weight. And ahead, the most terrifying test, landing. The Thunderbolt was a heavy machine. It loved long runways, smooth approaches, precise control. But Harper had neither a long runway, nor smooth approaches, nor precise control, and no hands. As they emerged from the clouds, he was met by the controller's voice. "Squadron 9, I see you. Lieutenant Harper, your aircraft is damaged. Priority landing. Confirm control." Harper looked ahead through the crack in the windshield, through smoke and blood. He pressed his feet so hard that the metal of the panel bent, and he managed to level the plane. He replied in a hoarse voice, "Control, holding with my feet." The airwaves fell silent. The controller, disbelieving his ears, asked, "Repeat?" "With my feet, flying the machine." After a second of silence, the controller replied, "Understood. Manual runway guidance. We're with you, Lieutenant." His Thunderbolt entered the landing glide slope like a drunken giant. It would lurch left, then dip its nose, then suddenly rise too sharply. Harper breathed short, fast breaths, like a man holding a burning house on his shoulders. Miller, inside, whispered, "Just don't fall. Not now." The radio operator prayed. The technician gripped the handrails. Every person in the plane lived in these seconds with one thought: please survive. The last turn, the runway ahead. All that remained was to level it, the most impossible task. Controlling with his feet, Harper pressed the right edge of the panel. Too hard, the plane lurched. He sharply shifted his weight to his left foot. He felt his muscles tearing, pain rising, his head spinning. But he held on, screaming internally, "Hold on!" And the Thunderbolt, wounded, smoking, broken, obeyed. The nose went up, the wings leveled, the landing gear touched the ground. Hard, roughly, with a jolt that shook the entire frame. But they touched down. The plane sped down the runway, shuddered, but Harper held it with a final push of his feet. And only when the machine came to a complete stop did he lose consciousness. Without strength, without blood, with the mission accomplished. He brought his entire crew home, with only his feet. At the airfield, the commander said, he landed the plane in a way others couldn't have landed even with their hands. Harper woke up in the hospital 2 days later. The first thing he saw was a white ceiling and the face of a tired, smiling nurse. The first thing he felt was a deep, throbbing pain in his arms. The doctors said, "A little more and you wouldn't have been saved." Both arms required long treatment. Burns, shrapnel wounds, damaged tendons. He almost lost his left hand. It was only partially restored. His right hand returned to life after months of agonizing rehabilitation. But the main thing was, he survived. Command submitted a report for commendation. His act was classified as impossible. He brought the plane home without hands. He saved the entire crew. He escaped a situation where anyone else would have died in 30 seconds. He received the award later, but when the commander raised a toast to him, he said, "There are pilots, there are heroes, and then there's Harper." After the war, Harper did not return to the sky. His hands were never the same again. But he remained in aviation. He became an instructor and passed on his experience to young pilots. His lectures were always met with silence. One could hear someone turning a page. He never boasted about that day. If asked, "How did you land a plane without hands?" he would reply, "I just did what I had to. The Thunderbolt did the rest." He lived a long life. Family, children, a job he loved, and the sky that never stopped calling him, though he no longer flew. Harper passed away quietly, many years after the war. Not on the battlefield, not in the sky, but at home, surrounded by those he had raised and taught. His crew said one thing about him: he didn't let us die, and by doing so, he saved himself too. A short chapter, humane, warm, and a period at the end of a story that began in fire and pain and ended in peace.